Let's learn a new role-playing game in just 5 rooms. We're going to use the 5-room learn-to-play method with Deadlands by Pinnacle Entertainment Group. Let's get ready, partner. So if you saw my last video, you know the concept behind the 5-room learn-to-play. We're taking 5 rooms in a dungeon. It can be really any kind of room, right? Or it can be not rooms. It can be a series of forest encounters. But we're going to take this 5-place concept, and we're going to use what I described last time with the 5 different room types that will teach us a role-playing game. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend that I'm the dungeon master and you are the player that is at my table. There are other players there too, but you will be the one that I'm focused on. And you're going to use this method to learn how to play Deadlands. So at the end of it, you won't be an expert of everything, but you will feel comfortable, hopefully, with the key mechanics of Deadlands. All right. In a nutshell, the reason you want to play a game like Deadlands and pick up the various books that come in line is because you want a Weird West setting, kind of Wild West. Wild West? Sometimes actually a lot like that movie, but it's up to you. And that's one of the neat things is this is a game and a setting where you can choose how much you want to be just showdowns at high noon, or do you want to have weird tech? Do you want to have lots of horror elements? It is built for a mix of those, and you get to toggle exactly how much is in there, making it a very fun system. Now, this is not the only system like this. You can look at High Noon at Midnight by Monte Cook Games, Haunted West from Darker Hue Studios. I haven't played either of those systems, but they clearly aim to provide this kind of an experience, but I'm just not familiar with that rule set, so we're not going to cover those today. The Savage Worlds system is kind of an old school type of RPG that you'll use to play Deadlands. What this means is that you're going to have characters that are fairly fleshed out. They're going to have ability scores. They're going to have skills. They're going to have essentially what feel like feats, their edges and hindrances. So there's a fair amount of that construction that can take place. At the same time, the game comes with pre-made characters, and you can see how simple they can be because of this card that I'm holding up. You could be somebody like a Blessed, and you can see there's just a little bit here with their attributes and skills, and then a few features on the back. And this is great to play in a game. The box set with the rules, the latest version of it, comes with a number of these. And you can just pick up one of these concepts like, a warrior or a mad scientist or a gunslinger. And you can just, see that they're all that simple and you can just run them off of these cards, which is super cool. For purposes of this adventure, let's pretend that you are playing this gunslinger. And so if you're curious, you can see what that looks like there. There are previews of this card actually available through various places at from Pinnacle Group. I think on the Kickstarter, they showed off some of these images, so you can get the concepts behind it. But we're going to pretend that you're just playing a generic gunslinger, and we're not super going to care about the hindrances that you took, the specific characteristics that you have. But we'll talk about them. We'll talk about things like spells and so on in case you were doing that. Let's very quickly review what a 5-room learn-to-play concept is. So as you can see here next to me, we have 5 different rooms that we're going to go through, and each of them is going to provide a slightly different part of the game or of the character sheet so that we learn in progress, right? So you're going to learn the Deadlands system by slowly going through this process. In this case, our first room is going to focus on skills, our second on creating an easy, fun fight, our third on role player negotiation, our fourth is going to showcase some aspect of gameplay unique to this RPG or provide additional reinforcement of some aspect we've played with before. And then we're going to have a thrilling boss battle. And we're not going to roll through everything here. I'm just going to show you examples so that you see how this 5-room learn-to-play concept works. And you get to learn some Deadlands. All right, let's do it. Okay, so here's how we're going to set up our adventure. You, your gunslinger, has been hired along with the rest of your posse, who I'm not going to worry about in this demo, but imagine you had a bunch of other players at the table, where you have been hired to chase down bank robbers who recently struck a bank in whatever town you've been hanging out in. And you've been hired and told the direction which they headed out. You've tracked them to a large old house in the hills. And as you approach, you see it's eerily quiet. It is now just about dusk, which you have used that sort of fading light to be able to sneak closer to some cover that's maybe 100 feet from the house. So here is where we get to our first room, because I'm going to touch on skills. Now, as you know, we're not really in a room, we're outside, but that's okay. A room can be a loose definition of a scene. So this is where I would say to you as DM, what do you want to do? And you might say, well, I really want to take a look at this place. Do I see anybody moving? Do I see things strange about the house? And I would say, okay, take a look at your character sheet. You see where it has notice and a D6. That is your skill die. If we were using a character sheet, I would point out that your skills are written on the side here. And what I try to do with this system, one of the reasons I like the 5-room learn to play system, is that it tends to focus on a small area of your character sheet or pre-gen, so that you're not overwhelmed by everything that is on a 2-sided character sheet or 2-sided card. Even a simple card like this can kind of overwhelm you with all of that writing. And what we would have done beforehand is I would have told you a little bit about your character without getting into the details. Like, don't worry about your character says, but hey, took a look at what it says here. Your twin smoke dragons have done in more than their fair number of deadly scoundrels and weird critters. So you're an accomplished gunslinger. You've got these 2 pistols. That's your basic concept. All you need to worry for now. And now we're in the scene, and you say to me, you want to take a look. I tell you to look at your skill section and where you have that notice D6. And now what we're going to do is you're going to roll that D6 to see if you hit the difficulty threshold that this situation calls for. The threshold is almost always 4, and if it weren't, I would probably tell you what it is, unless there was some great reason to keep it a secret. The second thing is you're going to roll another die, because you are what's called a wild card. All PCs are wild cards. It means you're special. You're not the random cowpoke out there on the ranch. You are a hero. You're an adventurer, right? And so whenever you make a roll of almost any kind, you will roll your wild die in addition, which is always a D6, in addition to your skill die, which in this case also happens to be D6. So we're rolling 2 D6. You're going to roll them and see what you get. So in this case, I got a fun result. I got a 1 on one of my dice, and I got a 6 on the other. Here it has a kind of special symbol for this Deadlands set of dice that I have. The 6, in fact, the highest number of any die you roll, if you roll that, it explodes and you get to roll again and add that together. Now I'm going to keep these separate. So I have the 1, and I can take the best of these that I'd like. So I can either take my 1 or what is so far a 6. I roll it again and I get a 1. So I got a 7. So I would ignore the 1. I would say I got 7, and that was my notice check result. I would say, well, you beat the threshold of 4. So you know the following. And I will tell you that when you look out at this abandoned house, what you see is this is a quite old house. The windows are boarded up very obviously. Both from the outside, in fact. So it's been boarded up like it's been abandoned. And none of these things have been taken off. Like, it's quite well boarded up. It's hard to see through the windows, maybe through a few gaps here or there if you got right up on it. That includes an upstairs, because this is a 2-story house. The front door is not boarded up, but the rear door is. And everything is absolutely still, eerily still, if you will. Not a sound moving. There are no bandits inside celebrating. So that is very interesting. You don't see anything else unusual about the house. There's nothing moving around, nothing strange about it, no secret anythings that you notice. And you did pretty well with that roll. Now, you could have rolled better. Had you rolled 4 above the threshold of 4, so an 8, you would have had a raise. So you did the minimum, and then if you did an extra iteration of that, so you went from 4 to 8, you would have a raise, and that raise would provide additional information. And sometimes an adventure, whether you wrote it or purchased, will say, with a raise, they learn the following. Generally, you don't need 2 raises or anything like that, though you can have that, especially in combat situations. But just getting that raise can be a sort of unlock of special things. I didn't have anything in this scenario for an unlock, but in theory, I would just have ad-libbed as a DM and tried to tell you a little more about it. Okay, so now you know how skills work, but let's kind of keep going with this scene. You tell me that you want to approach the house unobserved to try to get close and maybe listen at the door. So I have you make a stealth check. And again, you look at that skill area here, right? And that's why I like this technique, because I can just have you look at one part of your character sheet, not focus on anything else. And if you're using this big character sheet that's full of all kinds of things, we would just be on this one section with the skills, and we wouldn't need to worry about anything else on there, right? So similarly, you used notice before, now you look at stealth, and your stealth is only a D4. So D4 is not too great. When you roll the D6 of your wild die, plus your D4, we see what we get. I got a 4 on my 6, so still succeeded. Your D6 die saved you. You are able to move up quite quietly to the house, and you get to the door. You listen, which might be another check, and you don't hear anything. It's real quiet inside. Now, at a table in a convention, you would have other characters that might come up with other ideas, so you would further see how these skills, right, would work. Someone might try to make an occult check or a science check for some reason, or any of these other skills, athletics, as they want to climb up the wall outside or something like that. But let's assume that you all just go in through the front door and open up, which you actually find to be unlocked, and go on inside. As part of teaching you skills, I might have touched on a couple of other basic pieces that Deadlands has. For example, you each have a couple of bennies when you start play, and they're represented by some sort of token. These are like the official, like poker chips tokens that you can use. And I would let you know when it's appropriate that you can use these for a number of things. For example, to re-roll a check. So if you rolled and failed to do the stealth or do a notice, I might say to you, would you like to use a Benny to re-roll that? And you can re-roll the roll you just made, roll both dice, and see if you get a better result. There are also some other things you can do, like in combat or in different situations, that are good for bennies, and I would tell you at that time, but it's not worth going into it now. But that's just kind of a nice baseline knowledge to have. Another thing that might come up, especially as different characters have different ideas, right? Another player says, hey, I want to try this thing, or I want to sneak up. And when they look at their character sheet, they say, oh, I don't have stealth. Now you have to make an untrained check. And it's good to know how untrained checks work. You would roll a D4, but because you aren't actually trained, you have no actual D4, you're going to roll that at a -2. So you have a penalty, and you're trying to reach that threshold of 4. So even if you roll a 4 on the D4, you actually have a 2. So you're going to need to have the D4 explode, or have the wild die of your D6 reach a 6 so that it's actually a 4. Make sense? So that's how an untrained check works, and that's kind of neat. And then it would also cover things like maybe the critical failure, because that's a big deal. If you roll 2 1s, I'm going to improvise something bad that has happened, and maybe you make a ton of noise. Maybe something else happens that has effect later on. But I would role play that out for you, or show you some impact of the fact that you did a critical failure. If movement came up and we were in combat, I would tell you that your pace is written on your character sheet, and I would show you where that is. And that is like a movement rate. In this case, our gunslinger has a pace of 6, and that is times 5 feet. So you're moving 30 feet and around, very similar to D&D or other games like that. So if it mattered, that would come into play, though in this case it doesn't. But I'm going to assume that the characters have all made a few skill checks. Nothing big has happened. This is an eerie looking house, but nothing yet that stands out. And you move forward quietly, make it to surround the house, maybe gather by the front door, and then you finally decide to open it up and enter inside. Entering the house, you find a central area with a dining room and chairs. If you were to use skills, you might see that there are some signs of a fight here. There is some blood on a couch that's recent. There is a table that's overturned that probably wasn't overturned a while back. It seems like it's recently overturned, like maybe there's a drink that's spilled or something like that. You don't see any bodies here. And what I would probably say is that if you did a notice check and got a raise, or if you used the occult skill and got a raise, you would find, you got a success with the occult skill, you would find a broken box amongst some of the things that have been spilled. And the interior is lined with lead, which is very unusual. And for someone who has the occult skill, would be easier to know, hey, this is important. Generally, you do this to sort of isolate something from the rest of the world, sort of confine its magical powers. You might think to repair it right then and there. And if you did, I would say make me a science or repair, weird science or similar skill to try to see if you can kind of put it back together. Yep, now it's a working, once again, lead-lined box that would keep something separate from the greater world. But you might not do any of this right now, and that's fine. Let's assume that you just came in and you see this box, but you don't exactly do anything with it. You think maybe there was some sort of a scuffle here, but no one's around. This really finishes our room 1. We have learned about skills. Now it's time for that easy fight as you decide to go down the out of this room and open a hallway, the door to a hallway. So it's time for a fun and easy fight. You step into this hallway, you see several doors on the side, and out of the far one, the door opens and a stumbling body shuffles out towards you. It looks like one of the bandits. Maybe there's something that you recognize about them. I may make it up, like, oh, they had a distinctive hat with a feather in it. And they come out of there, but as they turn into the hallway slowly and awkwardly, you see this is a dead person. There is blood on their vest that has caked over from an injury that took place earlier today. Some number of hours past that's dried and should have killed them. It's, in the heart. But looking at them, you also see their eyes are off. And this is, in fact, some kind of undead or zombie. So for combat, the first thing I would do is the initiative system, which is kind of cool. You use playing cards. So what I would do is I would say in your case, because you initiated this combat, I'm going to let you draw 2 cards from the deck. And everybody else, I'm just going to give 1 card out to each of the players and to each of these sort of groups of monsters. In this case, there's just 1 grouping. So let's just randomly deal out some cards. I will give 2 to you. And those are an ace and a jack. So pretty good. And my bad guys have an 8. So they are going to go last. So you would take the highest of those 2, which is the ace, and fire away with your guns. And now I'll tell you how that works. I would also introduce the adventure deck. The adventure deck is a really cool tool used in Savage Worlds and Deadlands. And it comes back to the history of Deadlands from earlier editions of it. Where you can have really funky things happen, and the players get to choose when to use them. So what happens is at the beginning of the game, I would deal out 2 cards to each player, and those cards can have very interesting effects. For example, Here Comes the Cavalry is a card that says, help arrives from some source determined by the GM. And you can decide what that is as GM or Marshal, and it'll just kick in, and I could decide that a bandit that's on your side helps, or it was a person they had captured and they have broken free and now will help you in this scene because you chose to use it in this scene with the undead. You can have a card that this one is, and hell's coming with me, when your character dies, and it brings you back in a certain way called harrowed. So there are a whole number of different aspects like this, and I would probably give out some cards to you, and you could decide when to use them. But I won't worry about it too much for the purposes of our video. Just, I would teach you this as part of this fight. Probably, I could have technically done it earlier, but I would probably just want to keep things simple for room 1. So in room 2, I might say, hey, by the way, here are these cards. Okay, you've rolled initiatives. It's your turn. What do you want to do? And you tell me, I want to shoot that zombie. I did a video previously called Learn a New RPG in 4 Easy Steps. And the goals that I did in there, or the steps that I did were, the goal is fun, quick starts and cheat sheets, short experiences, and then stop and assess to decide whether you like this and you want to keep going, right? And you can very quickly learn a new RPG doing that. And this 5-room learn to play factor kicks in as well, because we can use the 5-room to say, hey, we're just going to have quick fun. We are going to use these quick starts, like these ready-made character sheets that we talked about. And I can give you a cheat sheet, which I have made my own Deadlands cheat sheets, and I will have that as a download link for you below. There are other great cheat sheets for Deadlands as well. So I would have a cheat sheet for you at the table to use through this scenario, and I would reference that as we are doing this. The 5-room learn to play is a perfect short experience, And at the end of it, you hopefully will say, you know what, I want to play more Deadlands. Okay, so in this case, I would say, hey, look at your cheat sheet and look at your character sheet, right? Because you are going to generally want, what you're talking about doing, shooting this zombie, is you're going to do a ranged attack. And this is going to be your shooting skill versus the range at which you are shooting, short, medium, or long. So on the back in your gear section, your character has 2 Colt Peacemakers listed, range 12, 24, 48. So 12 is your short range, which is in inches on the tabletop. It's interesting, Deadlands uses inches as if you're always playing in tabletop, though I almost have always played at Theater of the Mind. But we get the idea. We can multiply by 5 and say, hey, 60 feet. So well within the range of these zombies. So you are at short range, which means your threshold that you need to hit, your TN, is going to be 4 as usual to hit them because it's based on the range. So range attack, your shooting skill. And shooting, I have a D8. My gunslinger is quite good. So I'd say, hey, look at the skills. There's shooting. You're going to roll that D8 and you're going to roll the D6. And you are within your short range, so there's no penalty to it. I'm also going to say that there is no cover, though if I wanted to, I could have said the zombie's just leaning out partially, so it's -2 for cover, if I felt like including that to add more to it. But that's about it. I will say there are a lot of combat options in Deadlands, but I wouldn't worry about them now. You keep it simple and just have a fun demo. So I roll my D8 and my D6. My shooting die, the D8 got a 7 and I got a 5 on my D6. So I got a success either way I roll it, but I did not get a raise. I look at my gear again and it says here damage is 2d6 plus 1. So I roll my 2d6. I get a result of 6 and 1. So I roll that 6 again and I rolled a 6 again. So a 1 on it. So 13 plus the 1 is 14 plus 1 is 15 points of damage that I just dealt to that zombie. That is pretty impressive. So that was really sweet. The character, you get to see how exploding works. As your dice, you would have rolled them over again very excitedly and that, with a lot of excitement. And that is kind of a cool part about this game, is that everybody at the table goes, oh, wow, look at your damage dice explode. We add it all up and we get a really big number, right? Had you achieved a raise on attack, you would have rolled yet another d6 due to having had a raise on the attack. As combat begins, though I could have done it in scene 1, I would probably introduce a few interesting features to your character. And I tend to do these as they make sense, depending on what you say to me as a player. So the gunslinger has 2 hindrances, and I would explain that hindrances are something you take during character creation to decide a neat aspect of your character that you're going to have to role play. And the reason you do that is because you get edges that you also get to take that make you better. So you take the hindrances, you get more edges, and that balances out. And it also creates fun role-playing situations. For the gunslinger, you are the grim servant of death, which is a major hindrance. Death follows wherever you roam. You add +1 to all your damage rolls, but a critical failure on an attack hits an ally. You are also overconfident. You're not cocky, you're just the best. You also have a number of edges. The ones that are going to matter in this combat are the fact that you're ambidextrous, so you can use either hand, that's fine. You ignore the offhand penalty as well, that matters, but you won't care about it a whole lot. You are a marksman, so you can choose to ignore 2 points off of penalties. I'm not going to super worry about that, but you get to add +1 to your first shooting roll each turn. This would impact our attack roll, taking it from a 7 to an 8. So we actually do get a raise on our attack. You also have the edge called Two Gun Kid. So we're going to actually get to make a second shooting roll on your turn with your offhand at no multi-action penalty. We'll talk about multi-actions in a second when we get to when we get further in our combat. For this first round, you have shot the zombie, you have hit it, now we roll our damage. So because we got that raise, we get to roll 1 more d6, and I get a 3. So our total damage is 20. That is pretty awesome. The way this works now is we compare the damage inflicted to the threat, to the to the toughness of the monster. So our zombie has a toughness of 7. It's in the stat block. And that means that our 20 minus 7 becomes 13 points of damage. And damage works sort of like skill checks in that what you initially want to do is 4 for the initial effect. If I had dealt 2 points of damage or 3 points of damage, something lower than 4, you would see it hit the zombie, but nothing would happen as a result. It just shrugs it off. True, whether it's a zombie or a person, it means, it's just sort of a scrape, a bruise, but nothing that matters. When you hit 4, that is a hit that is significant, and in fact, deals what is called the shaken condition. In this case, it would mean that the zombie would be really close to death, but still moving on. It would still get to take its turn if it can get out of that shaken state. If you do more damage than 4, in increments of 4, you can actually kill a regular monster, or if the monster itself is a wild card, a special monster, you start taking off wounds, which will kill it. This is not a special monster. So when you dealt 4 points, it was shaken. When you dealt another 4, it is dead. So you did 9 points, that is 8, is a raise on damage. It is shaken and wounded. It cannot take wounds, so it is killed. The zombie drops to the ground. You have a second shot that you could have taken, but there is now no target in front of you. And I want to get other characters involved, so probably what I'd do is say something like, you're sitting there looking for targets. Make me a notice check. And I would have you roll to hear that the other doors sound like something's struggling to open each of them. We've got more zombies coming, right? That sets up the rest of your party to say, okay, maybe we want to, here's what we want to do. And they come up with tactics and so on. So the doors are going to open, zombies are going to come out. You may try to stop the doors or something like that. And at some point, what I will do is talk about multi-attack, because that's an interesting part of this game as well. You can choose to do up to 3 actions in a turn. And for each one that you take, you get a -2 penalty, a cumulative penalty for each action you take. So if you wanted to do something like shoot the zombie, close the door, and kind of secure it, that might be that I would say are 3 actions. So this would be our easy fun fight. I'm not going to go through every round of it, but I think you've gotten the point. And imagine that you're seeing all these players do their various things, right? Someone else is shooting with a rifle, and someone uses like their weird science Gatling gun. Somebody else might shoot an arrow with their bow. But you would see all of these characters making these checks, and you'd see how this combat piece works with melee attacks or ranged attacks. The zombies would get, probably a couple of them would get to shamble up there and attack, and you would do your side of defense. Melee attacks work slightly different in terms of what you compare. Instead of the range, your fighting skill goes against what's called a parry score that you have and every monster has. So it's more of an opposed check instead of opposed by the range on that attack roll. But we would go through that similar process, and that would give you a chance to see how things go. On the character side, what you would find with this easy, fun fight, if one of them got to do some damage, is again that you have a toughness. So you would subtract toughness from the damage done. You might be shaken. And so let's talk about what shaken does, which I have in my cheat sheet here. When you're shaken, you only take free actions, and you can move or run. But at the start of your turn, you get to make a spirit roll using one of your abilities called Spirit to see if you recover. If you get that 4, you recover. If you don't, that's a great use of those bennies we talked about, because a benny will remove the shaken condition and let you go. Often, players will save a benny just in case that happens, so you don't use them all up on rerolls. You'll live with some bad rerolls, because getting out of shaken, being able to do something on your turn is a big deal. And that's a kind of fun thing to do. If you were shaken and another 4 points of damage above that to where you take a wound, because you're a special character, you're a wild card, you wouldn't die when you take that extra 4 damage. You take 1 wound. And you can take up to 3 wounds, and after that, you are down and can't do anything. Your wounds do provide a -1 cumulative penalty to everything you do, so getting rid of them is good, which you can do with rest, you can do with magical healing, and so on. So the fight ends, and in that quiet, you get a chance to check out this hallway that came off of the main room where these zombies were, and the zombies were in various side rooms. You go into the side rooms, and in one of them, you find there's a locked door. And in fact, scratching signs on the door kind of marks where one of the zombies was trying to kind of break through into the room beyond. Listening, you might hear just a little bit of movement going on, and depending on what you do, something can happen. But this is our third room for roleplay or negotiation. And what we want to do is we want to, as part of our learn to play process, engage people in that role-playing activity, right? Especially new players. And if there's an angle to the system that deals with role-playing or negotiation, this is a great time to break that out. So what's inside? You might bash down the door. You might call out. You might pick the lock. But what you're going to find inside is that there is a wounded bandit who is in a bed under covers because they actually got shot back during the bank robbery. And though it isn't visible, she has a pistol in one hand under the covers. You have picked one of your friends has picked the lock. You open it up and you take a look and you see this bandit there. And you begin interacting, right? You know, hey there, who are you? I'm this gunslinger named whatever it is. What's going on here? I think we just saved your life. And the bank robber responds with their name and tells you a little bit about, maybe just a little bit what's going on, but they're clearly holding back. So I might have you use your skills. You might use persuasion and make a check. And they also might ask you some important factual questions like, are you here to arrest me? You mean to take me down, right? That kind of thing. We want to dig into that Wild West feeling. You think you're taking me down? I'd rather die than be taken back to the jail again. That marshal's never getting me, right? That kind of fun thing to dig into the concept. And you, hey, wait a minute, you know, we could have left here to be killed by zombies, right? This kind of back and forth that kind of happens. And when appropriate, we insert some skill use. And if there are other mechanics to the game, this is a great time to use them. And there could be, right? There could be a couple things. There could be one of these adventure deck cards that could have an influence on the scene. There might be an edge or hindrance that you would use, right? The fact that you're brash could certainly play into things, or overconfident. You have something called gallows humor that can be used to make a fear check, but that wouldn't quite apply here. But a lot of characters can have things that are meant to shine in a role-playing situation, and we would point those out and say, hey, you know, this other player, you've got this feature that can really help win someone over. You could use that now. So this negotiation also has some consequences to it, right? She can give you some information. For example, that she was wounded in the bank robbery. She was bandaged up by her fellow bank robbers, and they made it out on horseback. And then they went through all the loot that they had gathered from this bank in the other room while she tried to rest. She would be in and out of consciousness, but she heard them say something about, look at the gems on this thing, and something about a lead-lined box. Whatever it is that they got, they all went upstairs, and then she heard screaming. Something has been scratching at her door, but eventually the house went quiet until they arrived, and then the scratching resumed. That's if things go well, right? You learn this information. That lead-lined box might be something you go looking for. You might have some concept of what was in this box. But if things went poorly and you don't succeed, at the other end of the extreme is that the bandit is holding a pistol under her covers, and she might shoot at you. And she's not a real lethal threat because she's wounded and can't really move, probably shooting, let's say, at a penalty of -2. But so it might be that you were able to still talk her down and get through, or it might end up in violence. So with that role playing out of the way, we get to room 4. And room 4 is an optional room in my 5-room learn to play strategy. Here we can showcase additional gameplay. Deadlands and Savage Worlds actually have a fun amount of different types of gameplay that could be quite interesting to cover. So one of the things I like is that it's particularly for travel montages, but we could use it here as a way to just teach this system, right? So I might say to you, Deadlands has some really neat concepts around how you can rest and do things as the party to sort of grow closer together in what's called an interlude. And this can be part of a travel montage or a journey through the lands. So we're going to mimic that now. You've had this fight, you talk here, maybe you're helping the wounded bandit heal, and you kind of take stock of the situation, take a moment. And as you're speaking with the bandit and trading stories, maybe going around and spending some time talking to one another, we can have this interlude. The way an interlude works is that when you stop for a rest, we would say that we're having an interlude, and I would ask if anybody wants to participate. If you do, you would draw a card from the action deck, the playing card deck, and see what suit you drew. So in this case, I drew hearts. That would guide what kind of interlude I have, depending on whether we are in a moment of downtime, if we are doing something about the backstory, or if it's part of an obstacle or challenge that we encountered on our trip. So trek would not really work. And downtime is sort of what you do when you're off on your own, which could work in some cases, like you might be a priest that reads through a holy text. A backstory can be a tale of the character's past. So I would say that either of that could work. And they differ a little bit in terms of the suit that's drawn. So for hearts, downtime would be you practice a skill. What is it? And that could be one where I say to you, okay, so you're kind of sitting off to the side, listening in on everyone and watching, hearing what the bandit's saying. You can practice a skill. What is it? And you might say, well, I'm twirling my gun, right? Trying to see how quickly I can quick draw it or twirl it around or, and pass it from one hand to the other, something like that. And that could be interesting just to explain it. Though for a gunslinger, not completely unexpected. So maybe you want to do something very different. Like you want to say, I'm actually whittling a whistle. And I've been slowly working on this over the last few months for this reason, tied to this NPC in my background. Right? Similarly, backstory for hearts is a tale of the hero's greatest love, lost, found, present, or waiting on her back home. So here you could decide what that is and tell me that story and share with the other characters what it is. I like to use a slightly looser version of this, and I'm just telling you this for the fun of it. If I was running a demo, I would say this is how it works, and it's very flexible. You can do a lot with it as a DM. But I'm going to tell you that what I like doing with this is really also leaving it up to the PCs what they want to do in this interlude, where you might say, while I'm here relaxing, I think back on this thing that happened to me, and you make something up. Either way, those who participated receive a Benny, which we already saw what the benefit of that is. This is a nice thing that we give out a Benny to every character that participated, and that's kind of fun. Running this in the convention environment, the one thing that I'd be careful of is how long I would spend on this, right? I don't want you to, each character cannot give me a 15-minute story, or we've filled up the game with just that interlude, but something nice and quick. And I might just invite 2 players to do it, especially 2 players that I think that have been maybe kind of quiet up until now. This could be a way to involve them with this. But that's our room 4, showcasing some additional type of gameplay. There are other things we could have done here, like we could have taken maybe someone who's a weird scientist and have them build something. There are a variety of other things we could do. But in this case, that's what I would probably spend it on, is the interlude, because I think that's a neat piece of the game and I would want you to know about it. Okay, so we've made it. We've gotten to our 5th and last room in our Deadlands Learn to Play, and this is the thrilling final battle. Any cool adventure that you're teaching new players, you want to end with a cool final battle. So what's going to happen is when you go upstairs to that last room, you go up and there's maybe an empty room to one side and then an ante room, and it leads into the last kind of final room with the doors already open. So you kind of have a bunch of area you can work in. So there's an immediate room and a back room with the door open, right? That immediate room has a number of zombies, but coming through that doorway is something far worse, an undead that seems unholy, and maybe it has kind of smoke coming out of it, right? That could be a lot worse. Or maybe it's even skeletons that are in the first room, just to have a slightly different experience. So I might go with some skeletons. Maybe they're the ones that tore up the gang that was down below, that it'll be turned into zombies. So these far older zombies could be there. And then we have this much greater undead, who is essentially a kind of white type if you're used to D&D. And this thing, it has a badge of a sheriff, which could be interesting. So it's a sheriff that died in a cursed way, and has a hat. So you know that this was like a major cowpoke back in the day. This sheriff that met this cursed demise and now lives on. And this thing is holding in its hand, or maybe, well, yeah, we could have it holding in its hand this cross that is gem encrusted, which is the thing that has woken it from the dead. If the characters have picked up on the clues, they would know that they need to take this cross and put it in the lead-lined box, or that probably at least they know that the trouble started that. You would know the trouble started when this thing came out of the box. So you might think putting it back in the box would be good. Somebody could run down and get the remnants of the box and put it back together pretty quickly. They just need to make checks to do that, but that can also make it thrilling that you're trying to quickly go get the box. We'll hold them back. What's going to happen is those easy to kill skeletons, and I would just put a few of them here, they keep coming back to life, as does the white that's in here. And what that means is the fight we have is going to keep going until you solve the problem. Now, it's not hard to take the crucifix out of the bad guy's hands, partly because Deadlands has some neat rules, like you can make called shots to cause someone to drop something. So you could shoot it out of his hand to have someone else pick it up and put it in the box. So that creates a number of neat ideas. So we would go through this battle again. We would do initiative, but knowing that these stakes are high, and remind people that if they have any of these adventure deck cards, that if there's something useful, they want to use it now. We'd probably point out a few more edges or hindrances that they have that might impact this, or gear. And it's a good opportunity to see kind of the really cool things your character can do. For example, let's talk about the other character at our player who is playing a blessed, right? They're playing a priest. And this priest has spells. Our gunslinger does not. Spells are a type of power. So really they're called powers in the game. And our priest has a list of boost lower trait. So it's a kind of a way to hinder a monster or help an ally to be better at what they're doing. Healing, very important if someone gets wounded. Holy symbol, relief, and smite. And so we would want to make sure that they're aware of the ones that matter. So relief, for example, is very good for getting rid of conditions. That can be worth doing. Smite causes a weapon of some type to deal greater damage. So you can affect an entire magazine of bullets for a ranged weapon or a load of ammunition, and it gives the weapon's damage by +2 or +4 the raise. So your damage is increasing for every 4 that you get. So that's one thing that you could do. So the last power that I would point out is Holy Symbol. This is pretty strong because what it does is any supernaturally evil creature, which this would certainly count, our big boss, that wants to make a direct physical attack on the bearer of the Holy Symbol must make a spirit roll as a free action. And if there was a raise on the cast, you're at -2. And if you spend extra power points, you can actually cover a party with this as well, which makes it super powerful in this situation to protect a number of allies from the evil creature tearing into them. So the way that this would work, when you cast a power, you would say, I'm going to use Holy Symbol. I'm going to spend these number of power points. I'm going to roll my arcane skill. For the blessed, there is a particular faith skill that you would use. And now you're going to roll. If you fail, you're going to lose power points. Success, then you would do what it said. We just read over the power, offering that protection. And you recover 5 power points per hour. So you do get them back as you're going. Just in a particular scene, you can run out of them. So we would have that as part of our thrilling battle. We'd want to see some spell use going on or special features. We want to remind our gunslinger, for example, hey, you can shoot twice with no penalty. So you're going to be 2 guns shooting it all the time, pouring lots of lead into this. That idea that if you get a critical failure, you're going to be shooting your allies, that might come up. We would have to cover reloading, which is that for you spend an action and you get to reload a bullet. So if you run out from shooting all those guns, you're going to need to stop and reload or get a different weapon, attack with something else that you have. So if we had these 4 characters sitting at the table, you're playing the gunslinger, you would be tearing down with your guns these skeletons, right? Dropping them left and right, and maybe thinking, okay, I'm going to take down the skeleton so it's a lot easier to deal with the boss. And then you would see these skeletons start to rise again. And maybe as you do it, the gemstones on the crucifix glow so that it's a very obvious thing. Or I might require an occult check or a notice check for that to happen. But this being a new game, I'd probably just give it away or give everybody an occult check, something like that. So it's just easy, even if we're reinforcing mechanics. So now the party knows, oh no, they're going to rise. The blessed goes and they use their power to protect the party so that the bad guy, this undead cow sheriff, as it comes forward to either shoot or tear into you, it finds that it can't easily do that. Our warrior is attacking the big boss, taking them on, but also finding maybe that the wounds are healing because of this crucifix. So that's when our mad scientist says, hey, you know what? I've got the repair skill D8. That's pretty good. So I'm going to quickly fix this lead-lined box. Gunslinger, shoot out to disarm them. And if you succeed, and you get 2 shots at it because you can do that 2 shooting thing. What's it called? 2-gun kid. The crucifix goes flying through the air. Warrior grabs it, puts it in the box that the mad scientist repaired, and shuts it. And depending on how we were doing this battle, if I look at the clock and there's plenty of time, now you can defeat them and they do not rise. Or I might say they just all crumble to dust when that's happening. If we saved our bandit down below, we might have a hard decision to make that would be part of this thrilling final battle. We would, in fact, have at least one decision, which is, hey, we've got this crucifix that's worth a lot, but clearly undead in the area come back to life around it or come back to undeath. This is really bad. We should maybe destroy this or get rid of it. Or we might try to melt it down and hope that that doesn't cause terrible effects. So we have a decision as to what we want to do with this. And whether we even just return it to the bank, knowing that the bank might misuse it or it might belong to somebody who's terrible. In fact, and let's say you decide that you're going to destroy it or hide it in some safe place. I'd say, had you returned it to town, this crucifix would have gone back into the bank vault. But the person who owns it would now find out about its power and become a villain in our campaign, right? That idea of this can lead to more is something I try to do as the conclusion of this thrilling final battle. Similarly, you have a choice as to what to do with our bandit who is down below. What do you want to do with her? Do you let her go? Feeling bad for all the horror she's seen, do you take her to the jail back and say, yeah, no, we had one survivor, here she is, lock her up because she was a bank robber? That decision could impact the story as well. In fact, maybe she even makes you an offer, like, I know of a buried treasure, and if you'll let me go, I'll take you to it. So that could lead to our next adventure if you'll let her go. Otherwise, she goes off to jail, and we would have a different adventure. So that kind of idea is fun to leave after making some big decisions with the final battle. We would decide, make some, you'd have some impacts from those decisions. Last thing is I like to have some rewards. So in addition to possibly to receiving the payment for having recovered all of this stolen stuff, maybe with the crucifix, maybe not. Maybe you get less if you didn't turn in the crucifix. I would also have here that you find a few other things, like maybe there's some kind of neat unnatural gear on the sheriff that he had been buried with. And maybe some potions of some sort, some alchemical devices that function as potions that would allow you to heal up later in your adventures, and would be a kind of neat thing. That lets players know, oh, look, there is some supernatural stuff. You can get some neat gear, sort of weird science gear that can be cool. You may get some pieces of ghost rock that you can sell later or use, and you get a potion or two. That gives you that idea of the kind of benefits you can get from this in play, which would make it pretty neat. Deadlands, kind of like this, Oh, Deadlands is totally like this.
The Wild Wild West.
Like that, but weirder. Yeah, totally. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please, yes, give me those likes, the thumbs up, share this video with your friends. If you see me posting about it on social media somewhere, please share that with folks as well. I greatly appreciate it. And if you're so inclined, come join us on the Patreon community at Alphastream and become part of our Discord community. Really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.